Hey, it's John. Welcome back. And welcome back to the latest edition of the Live Cut. The premise of this series is to talk about live albums that don't get enough love or recognition. My guest with me today, you have seen on many appearances on the Contrarians, as well as on Peter Kerr's YouTube channel, Rock Daydream Nation. David Botas, welcome to my show.
Thank you very much. How are you today?
I'm doing well, David. Thank you for asking. And thank you for joining me.
Yep.
Today's live album that David and I are going to discuss is the third album and the first live album by the Runaways live in Japan. This was released on August 13, 1977 on Phonogram Records. It was originally only to be released in Japan and a few other countries, some of them in Europe. It wasn't intended for release in the United Kingdom or the United States. This would be released for after their first two albums, which were their self-titled debut and Queen of Noise, respectively. This was recorded at three shows, June 5, June 6, and June 12, 1977. And it's going to be a little hard pronouncing, but here we go. Kousei Nenkin Kaikan and the Shibuya Kokkaido in Tokyo, Japan. The Runaways at this point were Jerry Curry on lead vocals, Joan Jett on rhythm guitar and lead vocals, Lita Ford on lead guitar and backing vocals, Jackie Fox on bass and backing vocals, Sandy West on drums and backing vocals. This was produced by Kent J. Smythe and the Runaways. This is also the last Runaways album in their existence to feature both Cherry and Jackie. So, David, when did you first get familiar or were introduced to the Runaways music?
I think it was in 2010 when the movie came out.
Okay.
So I was really interested. I didn't know much about them besides probably hearing the name thrown around and I thought that they were like a punk rock band when I used to hear about them get mentioned. So I was completely wet behind the ears behind their history. I knew that what came after the Runaways was sort of like considered more important with like Joan Jett's career and Lita Ford's career in particular. So it kind of got eclipsed. The success that they had in the 80s sort of eclipsed like the little bit of success that they had in the 70s. And that's happened with some bands too. Come to mind like at some point. Um, this one that's damn, I've drawn a blank right now on the parallel, but like there's definitely like certain bands to where like the solo career that comes after it like is more um sort of like has more of a legacy, I suppose. So that the movie had me interested just because like I like looking into music that I don't know anything about and biopics. I always know that I take the biopics with a grain of salt. They're not going to be completely accurate on what they're talking about the time chronology. The Queen biopic is like a great example of that. There's like they're writing what is it? They're writing like I Will Rock You in like 1983 or something like that. To
I
like a
remember
Queen
that
fan, it's
right
like
now.
sacrilege. Yeah. But yeah, I was interested. I watched the movie a ton of times. I thought it was awesome. And then I just sort of gravitated towards like getting the albums. And for whatever reason, at that time, I got the bug to where I really wanted to and wanted to slash started to understand the craze behind live albums from like the 70s. So I like remember streaming, getting all types of live albums, even ones that people don't really talk about, like the band Free that Paul Rogers was in. They had a live album that I would listen to a lot. Rainbow's live album, I listened to that every day for like a year or 2 years. Um, just any band, like was it Earthbound by King Crimson?
Yes.
Anybody that had a live album, I wanted to sort of dissect like what was so special about it because I've always had this I've always had this bias where I just feel like listening to a live album is like listening to a studio one where like you have the headphones and you're going like this, where
Okay.
like you're sort of like you're you're sort of what's the right word? You're disconnected from hearing like the nuances that the crisp nuances that the studio brings. And I get that what the way to look at it a different way is you close your eyes and you put the headset on and you can feel the energy of the crowd and you can sort of imagine that you're at a show. And that's like the specialness of a live album. So that's kind of why it was my thirst for live albums and to learn about the Runaways based on the movie just coming out.
You mentioned before that you're really big in the biopics on certain bands.
Yeah.
How would you, for what you know about this band, and you said you've seen it many times, based on your knowledge of this band, how would you compare it as far as the accuracy compared to some of these other more popular ones that we've had over the years by Elton John and Motley Crue and the Queen Bohemian Rhapsody one, where we do see things that are out of context and see things that didn't happen at that specific time and things were made to be bigger than they actually were. Would you say the biopic for the Runaways was a little more accurate in that aspect, or did you see some things that were non-factual or blown out of proportion?
All right. Well, as a disclaimer, I have to say in a court of law right off the bat that I'm not a, I am not like I don't have a bachelor's degree in the Runaways, like history and whatnot. Plus, like I wasn't there, so I know for a fact that they're taking artistic liberties. I think that the thing that sticks out the most when you ask that, if you're just asking me, I don't want to trivialize it, but if you're just asking me like a normal guy on the street, like things that I remember, it seemed like they kind of gave it more of a happy ending.
Okay.
From what I understand, Cherie Curry went through a lot more trauma and a lot more damaging effects with her period in the band, and they sort of like toned that down by the end. I think it was Dakota Fanning that played her in the movie. That wasn't the way that the movie sort of like showed what happened afterwards. Um, she's going to be able to answer that best, right? And she's I mean, yeah, Peter Kerr like on Rock News just did an interview with her like a month or so ago, right? So like,
It was wonderful.
um, yeah, it was cool because it was right after we talked about. It was like a day after we talked about want to do this album. And it was like, oh shoot, look, there's another Runaways like a related video coming up for somebody we know. So there's that. Then there's the fact that they made the fifth member and like an amalgamation
Oh,
of like three or four different like people that were in it. Like they, and that's the Jackie Fox, right? Sorry, is that
correct.
there was Jackie Fox, and I think Jackie Fox was, I think, wasn't she just on this album?
She, I believe she was on the first two and this album, but this was the last. She had left the band right around the time this was released.
Yeah, and then they had somebody, they had somebody coming in and and forgive me, I don't remember her name. And then I like there were just different lineup changes, and then it went to just a quartet at a certain point. So like instead of like showing that story because it wasn't like pertinent to sort of focus on like those micro details for the
Mhm.
sake of the way that the movie would flow, they just like put this one character that wasn't even there um and made that a character that nobody focused on. And then, Lita Ford, I think, got a few like lines in the movie, but like most of the film was like centered around. I think Sandy West had a bit of like a larger part in it, but it was mainly like Joan Jett and Cherie Currie like as the main stars of the movie, and then the Kim Fowley character, which is was it Michael Shannon? He's like one of the greatest character actors. I always forget it if that's his name. He played Zod in like the newer Superman movies, like
Okay.
the Zack Snyder ones. He's an incredible character actor, and in that one, he's like he's a bully, and those are the two main things. The fact that they made that fifth character and they sort of took it easy on showing and not showing how devastating it seemed like the trauma was to those girls. So
Very good. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to focus on some of our favorite tracks on this album. And I'm going to lead off with David. What is a track on Live in Japan that really stands out for you?
The one that stands out the most is Getting Hot. So I love this song. And again, piggybacking off what I said about studio production, it's still a thorn in my side after knowing this album for 15 years that there's not a studio. Maybe it exists, but I haven't found it yet.
Right.
Leave it in the comments if you find it. I much appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Um, it's that riff, man. It's that lick is just so powerful. Like you would be surprised to hear that that wasn't from one of the bands that get a lot more acclaim. Those legacy bands. Somebody that might have been, people that have been working together for years. What are they, like 15 on this album?
Oh, they
16
were
years
all,
old?
yeah, 18, 17 to 18 years old. Because I know that I know Joan was born in 58. Cherry was born in 59. I think Lita might have been born 58. So we're talking 18, 19 years old here.
Yeah, and like the first album was like what, 75, right? Or 76?
It was 76. And the second studio album, Queen of Noise, was early 77.
Yeah, so they're basically writing this material and they're still in high school age. It's not complicated. It's not Ingmar Mal. Did I say that right? Malmsteen. Like, damn,
Yngwie
I can't say
Malmsteen.
things.
I've
Yeah, it
known
ain't.
his name forever. That's how I know.
It's not that. You know what I mean? But it still packs a punch. And it doesn't need to be that.
And this song here was co-written by Jackie and Lita. And what I wrote down in my notes is if you want to hear the heavy metal track on the album, this is the heavy metal track. This is what
Yeah,
is sin. And if you, on the second point, if you want to hear how great Lita was as a lead guitarist, check out her solo on here because she gets an outstanding solo on here. A little bit of it is unaccompanied at the end, but this track is heavy. It just kicks ass and takes names. The core, the main riff on here sounds like a heavier version of the main riff in the chorus of Feel Like Making Love. They just made it heavier. And
yeah,
yeah, when I listen to some of these songs, I'm like, they expanded on some riffs here that you heard on some earlier albums. And then there's songs on here, one in particular, that sounds like a prelude to a song that became a much bigger single for another band. But I will get into that when I go over my tracks here. As far as I'm concerned, as far as great songs, I love California Paradise. And
yeah,
this was from Queens of Noise. We got the lead vocals here from Cherry and Joan, and I love the way that they sing together. It's got a galloping beat on here, a very nice lyrical solo from Lita, very raucous. I mean, at times they were linked in with the punk bands back in the day, and you can tell why on some of these songs, although I do think they had better hooks in these songs did the Runaways. This one was written by Joan Jett, Sandy West, Kim Fowley, and Carrie Frome. She was a lyricist for a lot of these songs. I think this is a really strong track on here as the number 2 song. What's another song that really jumps out at you on this song? This one.
Oh, another one is coincidentally enough, it's another one that I don't have a studio copy of. I Want to Be Where the Boys Are. And this
Yes.
one's a Joan Jett led vocal, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, they happen to have a really good this album is so interesting because it's such the group's like an anomaly because a lot of the stuff that they a lot of the stuff they're playing sounds like that, like it sounds like old school rock and roll,
Yes, I agree.
You know, it's like it's again, it's reminding me of like it reminds me a lot of Kiss and Cheap Trick at the time.
Hmm.
And especially since those are two big 70s live albums, like the probably like the biggest 70s live albums, like besides like Peter Frampton too. Those are like probably like the three biggest ones that get thrown around for like stick out as like the big Mount Rushmores of their catalogs of 70s bands catalogs. That made a dent like in the pop charts and stuff like that. This there's this strange like amalgamation of old rock and roll, but these like youthful, you know, like young women or you know adolescent women, like you just don't. Where do you find that elsewhere? Like where do you just don't find that anywhere?
At
It's
this
not
time, you did.
pop, but
You
it's. Sorry, go ahead.
at this time you didn't. I mean, they were trailblazers. They, along with Susie Quattro a few years earlier and Fan
Yeah,
years earlier, they were trailblazers in this aspect. Kim Fowley says in the liner notes here that he was trying to make the female Grand Funk Railroad. They have that kind
uh,
of sound to them because there were different sides of Grand Funk as we would hear later on. But early on, they were just a kick-ass rock and roll band. And
yeah,
they had a bit of a here I noticed what you were saying, David. They do have an old school sound to them, like an old 50s rock sound, particularly in the songs that Joan writes. When I hear this song and a few others on here, you got that great piss and vinegar that you had on
yeah,
early Joan albums. This sounds like something that'd be on Bad Reputation or I Love Rock and Roll. Very, very catchy. Good lyrical solos on here. It's just it's just kick-ass rock and roll. I think this is an excellent track. And you were mentioning before, you were talking about some of the great live albums of the 1970s. And there's three that you mentioned right there that are very, very top notch. When I listen to this album, to me, this is what at Budokan was the Cheap Trick, who incidentally opened for the Runaways early on because the Runaways were getting more traction and they came out a year earlier. Like the debut album came out a year before the debut Cheap Trick album. To me, this
yeah,
has that same kind of feel because we're putting it out early in our career. We have songs on this album that weren't released on other studio albums. When I think of At Budokan had Look Out on there. That wasn't on a studio. That wasn't on a studio album. They had a cover of Ain't That a Shame on there. And we got
yeah,
covers on here. And then on there, you had Surrender, which was the single because they were touring Heaven Tonight at that point. But that's the only song from Heaven Tonight on the album. Album is most of it is the second album. And Need Your Love would come out later on the Dream Police album. But here we have four songs from their self-titled debut, three from Queens of Noise, and we got five that are new tracks. And the songs that you're mentioning here, Getting Hot, I Want to Be Where the Boys are standouts to me. They're both excellent. I would like to put a focus here, though, on Neon Angels on the Road to Ruin, which was originally on Queens of Noise. I keep saying Queen. So, Neon Angels on the Road to Ruin, they take the riff from Montrose's Rock Candy and they make it better. If you listen to the live version compared to the original on Queens of Noise, I think this blows it out of the park. It makes that original sound like a demo to me. It's like they put new life in this song and they play it with a lot of fire. Again, we have a catchy ass chorus on here. This just rocks very well. Great solos on here. Vocals outstanding. We got lead vocal from Cherry Curry, and Cherry Curry, what a front woman she was back then, would you say?
Yeah. Yeah, she's got power, kind of like Grace Slick in a sense. But like all these, they're all like harnessing their masculine side on this. You know what I mean? This isn't, there's nothing, I think that's kind of the point of the band. There's not really many moments to where you see like the soft side. I think that it was made that way. I think that there had to be like a giant, like youthful and vigor, and there's just like a lot of energy. And like I saw Kim Fowley in an interview before he died say once that like people tried to say that they were, you know, it was inappropriate that they're sort of like being, um they're not sex kittens.
Right.
He said, you know what I mean? That's not like, even though they might have got that, because there's a few songs on here where they're like talking about, teenagers talk about that stuff, like even it's uncomfortable, like they'll talk about sex and stuff like that, but like, you know, I want to be where the boys are and all
Mm-hmm.
that. But he said he likened them to like a sports team, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Like just sort of like there's a lot of um like excitement. And that's one thing too that I remember about the film is you see Cherie Currie sort of like harnessing and channeling, like she's like very reserved at the beginning of the movie, and she's sort of stage shy, and then Kim Fowley kind of like channels it out of her, like, and sort of like forces out of her for her to sort of like, you know, stand into like this very powerful like stance. So there's like a lot of power behind like all this music. So it's kind of like, is it power pop? A garage and power pop are kind of like kissing cousins as it is sometimes. Like
Yeah,
maybe, or maybe the influence, maybe the bands that like that end up sounding that way usually like bands that are considered garage, like back in the 70s, or like power pop. You know, you figure they might have known about, maybe have known about Big Star. Maybe they would have known about the the Stooges, or like you said, Grand Funk. Like definitely, like there's a lot of energy there. Like, you know, so yeah, I forgot how we went into that, but but were we still talking about the live stuff? The Cheap Trick, like in relation to how the Neon Angels on the Road to Ruin is like sort of like the live version is like the more superior version. Is that what we were?
right.
Sorry.
Like, right. Exactly. Because where I was going with that is if you listen to the original I Want You to Want Me from In Color, it sounds like bubblegum.
It does. Yeah.
But then it's just on fire and so exciting and passionate on the live version. Here, I think Neon Angels on the Road to Ruin. I mean, I don't think it so much sounds like bubblegum. I just think it sounds reined in and it sounds like a demo, but I think on here it just goes into full bloom. It just has a lot more fire and passion to it.
Yeah, and that's, and you, the one exception to my, like, I like the studio version better than the live version. There are a couple exceptions that I have. Usually it has to do with the fact that the live version is like rainbow and it's extending it for like 15 minutes,
Okay.
and there's all soloing and stuff. So it's kind of like a different composition at that point. Um and maybe if there was a studio version of that, then I could compare apples to apples. But in the sense of, the thing about I Want You to Want Me is, I grew up hearing the live version. And then when I heard like years later, like when I wasn't just a tyke hearing it, like when I'm 3 years old on the radio, and I listened to the studio version, I'm like, this sounds so different. And I didn't like it at first. Eventually it grew on me, and I love both. But that's an example of how like there is like this shift to where it goes into like um it goes into it just goes into like a more of a the edges are sort of like not dulled on that one when they do it live. You
Gotcha.
know, it doesn't have that piano like Beatlesque like element to it.
Right.
So, you know, that one it sounds like it sounds more like Obla Di Obla Da
Yeah.
when it's on is it on Heaven Tonight?
That
Is it I
is,
Want You to Want Me?
I Want You to Want Me was
Or In Color?
actually on In Color.
In Color, yeah. I'm not a big Cheap Trick guy, so I don't know the albums that well. But I'm always warming up to them. There's a few songs I love by them. But yeah, there's an example.
Very good. So, David, what's another track on this album that you think is one of the spotlight highlights of this album?
I'm gonna go with You Drive Me Wild.
Okay.
And this one's got like this is a Joan Jett vocal, correct?
Yes.
And it's got this one's chorus is like kind of 50s-ish. Like is it kind of like boogie?
A little
Am
bit.
I wrong here?
Yeah, it's got a boogie feel to it. It has a shuffle feel to it, actually.
Is it okay? I don't know. I don't know the difference.
They're similar.
Yeah, you're I'm exposing how much of a layman I am when it comes to some of this stuff. But I never, you know, introduced myself as like a I'm not a musician, so I'm not an expert at this. But yeah, on the outside looking in, as just a music like a kind of hardcore music listener, casual with certain bands, casual with the Runaways. This one has the feel to where like I don't really go out of my way to listen to you know that 50s rock and roll type of stuff as that much, even though I've been getting more into it. This is sort of like the what would I say? Like it's the go between. This is the middle of the road that gets me into that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I like it. It reminds me of a different the chorus reminds me of a of another song and I cannot put my finger on what it is.
Yeah, I thought about this with a few songs on here, but I didn't think about it with You Drive Me Wild, although I do think it is one of the standouts on here. Now,
Maybe it's just a shuffle-esque chorus or something. Maybe
oh,
that's what it is.
yeah,
It's not the riff that I think sounds familiar, even though it's not like a complicated riff. It's probably been done before.
right.
It's just you drive me wild, yeah, yeah. You know, it's just kind of it's just it's a simple chorus that is done in that like old school rock and roll way. It doesn't sound like they took too much time having to write it. They make it sound easy and it's very catchy, you know?
And interestingly, two of the songs that you chose as standouts are two written by Joan. And Joan wrote this and she sings it. And again, I have on here, I think this is even more of a prelude to what she do on her solo career. Especially, it sounds like something to be a dead ringer on Bad Reputation. Because the thing about Joan, what we think about her as a solo artist, she wrote or played great three-chord rock and roll, and there was a lot of attitude.
Yeah.
And that's what you got on here. It's very, very catchy. It's got a lot of attitude to it, and it kicks ass. It's very, very good. I want
Mm.
to and I want to focus on what is perhaps the most famous song by the Runaways, and that's Cherry Bomb. That's the third to last track on the album. This was originally on their debut. This was written by Joan Jett and Kim Fowley, but the lead vocal on here is performed by Cherry Curry. Slightly faster tempo on here than I think on the studio version. Live, it sounds more forceful, more confident. Joan herself would re-record this on her 1984 album Glorious Results of a Misspent Youth. That was when I first heard the Runaways. I first heard the name
Oh,
the Runaways because up until, I mean, I heard Joan Jett long before I heard the name the Runaways. But when she put out that album, and that would have been album number 4, they put Cherry Bomb out as the video on MTV back in 1984. And that was the first time I heard of the Runaways. Now, it's interesting when you hear that version compared to this version and the studio version by the Runaways version is aged much better because the studio version, it it's very shiny. It's got those shiny drums on it. It's more glam rock. It's the same song and all, but the way it's recorded, you're like, oh yeah, this was recorded in the mid 1980s. And although Joan does a good job on the vocal, now she's doing the vocal how we had Cherry on the Runaways version. I think the version on here has aged better because we didn't have those studio effects and we didn't have all the reverb on the drums like we had in the 80s. I think this is a outstanding version. I could see why this is their signature song. If you go to see Lita Ford these days, she's been playing this live for a long time. You still hear,
Yeah.
and you still hear Joan play this live. I've seen them both in the last 2 or 3 years or so, and they both did Cherry Bomb. And of course, it got a great reception from the crowd.
Mm.
So, other songs on here that really stand out to you?
I'm partial to well, you brought up is it California Paradise?
Yes.
Is that one? I like that one quite a bit. I do like the three that you brought up actually would probably be like my next, you know, if I was gonna rank the songs as 12 tracks, like my top three, and then in four, five, six would be an order of like your top three.
Okay.
And I do like Come On. The Cherry Bomb that Joan Jett did, it sounds like it's been sort of like it sounds a bit neutered. Like it doesn't have the energy. Um it it doesn't really sound like it doesn't have like a bit of a danger to it, even though that the first one seems like it has a danger.
I agree
Maybe
with
it's
that.
because if you're listening to a 15-year-old girl sing it and she's doing it really good, like you know what I mean, it's not like campy or anything like that.
Right.
It's a little bit more dangerous than if you have those lyrics being sung by however old, Joan Jett was in her 20s at that point. I think that might have something to do with it.
That's an excellent point, and I would agree with you on that.
Yeah, a 25-year-old woman would have wrote those lyrics a different way. She wanted to sort of like convey that emotion with different words, I guess, or a different way. And she's got a like ch 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 cherry bomb. That sounds like interesting, like when in the mid '70s, but I guess like doing it when it came out in the '80s, like, and you're like that age, it doesn't pack as much of a punch.
I agree
That's
with that.
my assumption. Maybe that's why it doesn't. And it's also because the original one's great. I don't know if I agree with you to say that the studio one is inferior to the one that's on the live album, because I still think that the first two albums, right? They're not like polished. Like you know what I'm saying? Like
Oh,
they're recorded live. They're just like live in studio. Like so, like they're not. It's not like what we're talking about with Cheap Trick before. That I Want You to Want Me, where it's so different.
right.
So like it still has that. It's just like more energy. That it's like when I have this when I've heard people talk about how they love Kiss Alive. Those first three Kiss albums that predate Kiss Alive, it's really raw stuff. Like it
Yes.
sounds really raw. It doesn't sound overly polished. I don't think they had the budget for it,
No,
anyways. It's just usually what I hear is like there's a lot more energy and more of a feel going on. So again, like there's that the junior Kiss, like junior female Kiss, junior female like Cheap Trick type of sound is the way I always thought like the Runaways.
very good. I definitely see your points on that. Absolutely. I want to put a spotlight on their cover of Rock and Roll, originally written by Lou Reed f- for the Velvet Underground's fourth album, which was Loaded. Now, I'm still partial to the Velvet Underground version, but I still love this version because they make it their own. If you've heard, have you ever heard the original?
I'm not attentively.
Okay.
Velvet Underground is one of those bands that I got a lot of respect for and I haven't spent a lot of time with,
Okay.
which just means that eventually like I'm probably going to get really into them.
Okay. Very
Um
good. The original, it's it's kind of got jangly guitars on it, and the vocal by Lou is very, very free, very, very loose. It's very, very catchy. What When they put out that album, they were pressured by their record company to give them nothing but hit singles. That's why they called the album Loaded. So,
mm,
and that was one of the two songs that hit FM radio back in the day. The other one is the more popular Sweet Jane, which Lou covered on his own, and Mata Hoople covered it, and it's been covered by the Cowboy Junkies and many other artists. What I really like what the Runaways do with rock and roll is they do it in more of a staccato version, like dun it's all right, dun. They try to make it heavier instead of have that free do 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 do. That's how the original goes. Here they try to make it rock harder, and they do that. And you got the nice call and response that Sherry has going with the crowd and singing the chorus, the "It's All Right" part. It's more staccato. It's got more of a stop start rhythm. It's kind of like it's, it's like heavy metal meets bubblegum music, the way they do
yeah.
their version. And I like what they've done with it. They really made this one their own. And even with Wild Thing, which was the cover on here, which the Trogs made a number one hit in the 1966, and this was a concert staples sang by Sandy West. Here they made it their own too, but they made it more of a driving version than you had with the Trogs version. So this is the Runaways live in Japan. David, what would you give this album on a scale of 1 to 10?
If you asked me that question 15 years ago, I would have gave it a 9.
Okay.
Easy. Um Maybe it's because I haven't been in the mood to really listen to it and fatigue can sometimes, sort of influence scores. If I was gonna rate it now, it'd be like more in like a 7 range, to where it's definitely the way that I do my own scale, my own number system is that a 7 is a definite own. It's already reached the point where this is something that should be in your collection. It's just not a classic, but I have a previous relationship with this album where I thought it was a classic. So I don't know if you cut it if you split it in half. I guess like if I'm gonna be generous, like it's more like an 8 territory because I'm meeting it halfway, like the potential of what I thought about it and like how I feel about it now. Um, Definitely worth listening to. Definitely if you're this again an anomaly. If you ever meet like I don't know how your demographic is, but if there's teenagers that and they do like listening to music from the 70s, they might be able to relate to the lyrics and just think it's so cool that like there were teenagers that could pull this off. Because you can hear, like you were saying about like the call and response, they're like pretty seasoned being live and being able to sort of like do the crowd control and stuff like that. And it's you wouldn't imagine that they haven't been doing this for like you think that they might have been doing this since they might have been like 8 or something. You know what I mean? The
Mm-hmm.
way that like the Bee Gees were, like they were really
Right.
young when they were doing it. So by the time they were like mid-teens, like they were very seasoned. Um, Especially those like guitar solos, I think I want to be where the boys are. Like that one also has a killer guitar solo from Lita Ford. So like where are those at? Where did those songs go? Like, where did they go? They're so great, and they didn't end up on albums. Like, um, I do think that like One of my favorite songs by the group came out afterwards. It's called I think it's called In a Million.
Yes,
Oh man, that would have been so great live. And maybe there is a live cut of it somewhere, but like that would have been so great. I assume it wasn't just written yet because it came out on the album like a year or two later. I think
now
like a
the
year later.
Runaways. Yeah, now the Runaways that came out.
Yeah. Yeah, that one just has like a again, it's kind of like Getting Hot in the sense that it's like more of the heavy metal one of it. Getting Hot is kind of just like a junior victim of changes. Like it's not as long as that song is, but it's
Right.
like boom, like it, it really just like it drops the anvil like on you.
Very good. I would give this an 8.5. I think the songs on here, more often than not, are very solid. I think the performances on here are excellent. Cherry really knows how to work a crowd. Lita
Yeah.
Ford is already becoming a guitar hero at this point, and Joan is already finding her way as a songwriter as well as a vocalist. One other song on here that I do want to put a spotlight on, I should have did this earlier, is American Nights. When I listen to the riffs on here in the beginning and during the chorus as well, I hear the preludes Living After Midnight. It has that kind of accessible feel to it. This is one of the most memorable songs on the album. I think it's very, very catchy, and I like the breakdown on here, which we really get the crowd into it.
Yeah.
Again, great lead vocal from Cherry on here. She is got charisma out the wazoo throughout this album. It rocks really hard. But I hear the riffs on here. It sounds familiar. And I'm like, yeah, this is that same kind of accessible rocking, yet like kind of a pop riff that you'd hear on Living After Midnight. Or maybe Shoot 'em Down by Twisted Sister in 82 off Under the Blade. It's got that same kind of feel to it. But all in all, I do like this
Yeah.
album a lot. And I do like the versions of Wild Thing and Rock and Roll as well. This is The Runaways live in Japan. Have you heard this album? Did you know of the Runaways back in the day? Did you ever see them live at a lot of the great clubs they were playing back in the day? They were playing theaters and clubs that are still around today, like the Agora Theater in Cleveland or Bogart's in Cincinnati. Cheap Trick was opening for them. The Ramones were opening for them. Later on, they'd be opening for Rush. Right when Cherry left the band and Jackie left, they were offered the opportunity to open for Alice Cooper on an arena tour, but that fell through the cracks for them because of the breakup.
Hmm.
Yeah. What are your favorite songs by them? Have you seen the Runaways movie? And what do you think of the solo careers that Joan Jett, Lita Ford, and Cherry Curry had? Please let us know in the comments. David, thank you so much for joining me today and for recommending that we talk about this very strong live album from 1977, The Runaways, live in Japan.
Right on.
If you'd like to see more of David Botas or me and David Botas on panels, check out some of our episodes on the Contrarians on YouTube. I'll have a link to our panel discussion from a couple of years ago when we talked about Thin Lizzy's Chinatown album from 1980. Also, check out David's work on Rock Daydream Nation here on YouTube. That's Peter Kerr's channel. David has been featured on a few episodes this year. So definitely check them all out. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Do what you love, and we'll talk to you soon.